I believe that the most powerful stories and works and pieces of music and novels, um, I believe they are both a reflection of that person, that only that person could write in that way. Only that person could create that in just that way. Um, and as I age and do this a little more, the more comfortable I am saying, "Oh, I need to put more of myself in here because that's the only unique thing I've got."
From cave drawings to family histories to stories around the fire, humans crave order among chaos, connection amid isolation. So we tell stories. Our mission at the Storytellers Network is to bring the art of story to the masses. Whether you're in marketing, you're an entrepreneur, or you're developing your own personal brand, telling your story effectively can make the difference between celebrating milestones and collecting unemployment. The Storytellers Network strives to help storytellers tell their stories so you can learn from the best. Now, your host, Dan Moyle.
Welcome to the Storytellers Network podcast. I'm your host, Dan Moyle. I'm so excited you're here. Today, I get to have a singer-songwriter on the show to talk about musical stories for the Entertainment Storytellers season. So I'm really excited about that. Before we get to my guest, a quick reminder, the website has all the information, resources for you to better tell your story, past episodes to get more inspiration, and contact information from me if you want to get in touch with me. It's all at thestorytellersnetwork.com for all that. So today's guest is singer-songwriter Aaron Burdett. He's one of the top 10 most important musicians of Western North Carolina, according to WNC Magazine. Named alongside such greats as Doc Watson, Steep Canyon Rangers, and the Avett Brothers. But it wasn't always easy, though, as you might imagine. After seeing a lot of his friends and musical colleagues struggle to be full-time musicians, sometimes at the cost of their marriages and family lives, actually, Aaron moved back to his hometown and decided to go another route. He started a construction business and built a home for himself and his wife and started a family, all while continuing to write songs and play music, recording an album every year or two or so. Back in 2013, he decided to pursue music full-time. So fast forward to today, and his distinctive, clear voice has carried his dream into a successful career. He's still building houses with his dad, and he's playing music, and he's recording. And as you'll hear in the conversation, he's not recording albums necessarily. It's more about recording spurts. So you'll see what that looks like and why that's come about. So Aaron actually has 7 albums dating back to 2005. He has a Spotify channel that you need to subscribe to or need to follow, whatever you want to call it, on Spotify. He tells stories through his music, through his lyrics, and his performances. So with all that said, let's get to Aaron's stories. Welcome to the show, Aaron. Thanks for taking time to talk to the Storytellers Network listeners, man.
Sure, Dan. Glad to do it.
So this season is Entertainment Storytellers, and I'm a big fan of music. I tried to dabble a little bit at one time in my history. I'm not good at it, but I'm a listener, and we need those too, I guess. So I was really excited when we were connected, actually through Douglas Burdett. He said, "Hey, you need to talk to Aaron." And, so that was a really nice connection. But I was excited. But when I reached out, did you think of yourself, like, were you surprised? Do you think of yourself as a storyteller, or were you like, "Oh yeah, I can do this"?
No, I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot just in relation to my songs. Many of the songs that I write tend to have that little arc. And that's kind of how I approach it. So no, not at all. I mean, it's there's storytelling as a here in sort of mid-southern Appalachia. There's a long storytelling tradition, and that's a different animal from what I do, but it's related. So no, I was not surprised.
That's right.
Hey, it seemed like a decent fit.
Good.
I've been called worse.
You've been called worse by a lot better, just so we can.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about your music, Aaron. I would kind of describe it as this like folk story, a bit of a country feel, but it's not country, but it's just like it's just good acoustic storytelling music. I've been listening to it in preparation for our interview, and I gotta say, man, I'm following your Spotify channel now, so I love it.
Okay, good.
But how would you describe what you do?
I would say, I get asked this a lot, and
Yeah.
it just depends on who you're talking to, how far down the rabbit hole you go. On some days you just say, Americana singer-songwriter. On some days you say, well, I'm sort of a folk singer that came from a little bit of a bluegrassy background, but sort of pointed towards the folk rock people that I heard growing up from my dad's record collection. But it's the more I get asked, the more I learn about what it is. And I mean, I'm from that that sort of singer-songwriter ilk. I don't know, where you're singing about your own experience. You're kind of describing something from your own different sort of point of view, hopefully. Well, that wasn't a very good answer, but
No, that's all right. Well, we'll break that down. But made me think though. You said you write kind of your story, which is one of your songs, "Write What You Know."
And, that's true.
Just heard that today actually in my rotation. I was like, wow, that's really good. So I get it. What was that collection like from your dad's LPs? Who are some of those influences for you?
Well, mom and dad were in college like 68 to 72 ish. So they're right there in that sort of sweet spot for the old hippies. And dad is a huge music fan. And he was just telling me the other day about how he and we worked together a good bit during the day. I'm a contractor during the day. And he was talking about how they had at this house they lived at, they had the circle of sound. So they had the turntable set up, and they had it forked to 3 separate amplifiers, and had the speakers set up around the room somehow. So it was
awesome.
The circle of sound. But he was a big Stones fan, and of course there was lots of Beatles, and but the band and Dylan and James Taylor. And I remember Cat Stevens hit home for me when I was real young, 8 or 10 years old. And from there I sort of got into I don't know, he was in the the record club. So we still got Rolling Stone when it was about as big as a bath towel.
Right.
And he would always pour, he'd have his 10 he could get or whatever. And he would always, read all the reviews and decide what to get. And so, I mean, I kind of lost track with his record collection about when vinyl stopped being produced, mid-late 80s, when he started moving towards CDs. Just a whole bunch of people through that. Lots of Dead, and then I sort of got on my own kick when I moved to Boone. I got heavy into Doc Watson and bluegrass and newgrass and acoustic, pseudo acoustic guitar powerhouses, your David Greers and Norman Blakes, and just really, for me, I did a little heavy metal in my early teens too. But so that was sort of like, it felt like heavy metal energy on acoustic instruments. It's just really not aggressive is the wrong word, but it's just really energetic. Yeah.
I can see the metal bluegrass tie, and I've heard some metal done in the bluegrass style, which is really cool. Like that's pretty righteous, man. So
picking on Zeppelin and like picking those Picking On series.
Yeah. So sidetrack then. What was your metal taste like?
Oh, let's see. Here's how I dated. I was born in 1974, and Appetite for Destruction was released when I was 13 years old, which is, it just couldn't have been more perfect. I remember exactly where I was when that Guns N' Roses showed up. Of course, before that, I was listening to Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, and But I liked, I don't know, I liked Metallica and Megadeth and all that sort of mid '80s hair metal stuff. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I still have a whole trunk full of cassettes over there that
Nice.
when I want to feel some shame, I go look at it.
Yeah. I don't, there's something, so I'm a big Metallica fan, but there's something about Appetite that gets me every time. There's a magic in that album that I just can't find anywhere else. I don't know. I guess it's their story of the streets of LA or something. Like man, it is so good. So
well,
yeah.
every once in a while, something comes just slightly out of left field like that.
Yeah.
You know, of course, it helps to be 13 when that stuff, you know, angry young man.
Right. For no good reason. I mean, for me anyway, middle class America, like, why am I an angry teenager? Like that just,
my life is so hard.
Right. So when you're getting ready, Aaron, to kind of start, well, I guess my question would be, I should start with, do you start new projects, or are you always creating as the storyteller in music?
Well, I'm a little bit deadline oriented. So, matter of fact, we're going into the recording studio in 2 weeks to record a few songs. And I have, I don't know, a few, at least a couple dozen that are sort of floating at the top of the bubbling brew at any given time. And I just have to sit with them. It's just time. I mean, for me, it's just time. The inspiration will show up if I can make myself available. Much like I said in that song. It's funny how some of those songs, I was singing some from a few, like 5 or 6 years ago. And I was like, whoa, this is prophetic. I didn't even know I was writing this at the time. And I'll be some lines where I'm like, wow, wait, that's just right where I am today. I don't know. Then with storytelling in a song, there's just all these different elements that there's just a lot of different elements you got to pull together. I mean, some you can lean on, and some you have to work around. You know, the limitations of, I mean, you don't want to get much above 4 minutes, and much of that is a repeat of stuff that's happened before. So you got to get a lot of information out either succinctly or descriptively, or both, preferably, in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. Is that hard to kind of reconcile, or do you find yourself wanting to tell longer stories, but you're like, well, I got to keep it at 3 minutes, 4 minutes?
It would be way easier if I could have 8 minutes on every one, but that is that's the beauty of the constraint of it. You can't, that doesn't work. This just doesn't work. And so the hardest part is paring back, because I'll say, well, wait, this verse is the whole thing. And for me, it's important to have, at any given time, somebody that I can say, hey, would you look at this? Do you listen to this? And I have my lead guitarist is doing some production for this next album, and he's been very valuable to me, just to be able to say, hey, listen to this. And he'll say, that whole verse there, I'm totally not interested in. And I'm like, okay, let me think about it. And then so sometimes it's like, but no, you have to be interested. I have to fix this. Or sometimes it's like, okay, let's let it go and then see what it is.
Yeah.
I will say the other beauty of it is the more space you leave for people to paint their own picture, the richer it will be. That's another little element of the getting less is more, because people will always paint a much more vibrant picture and draw their own experiences into it, much more than I can do if I just spell it out. It's important to leave it kind of somewhat open to interpretation.
Yeah,
I think
I can see that. And as a listener, I know I can feel music, and I think that I feel what the writer's writing, but I also know that I don't, but I like that interpretation, so I can see that.
Yeah.
And I think, so for me, I did some creative writing back in college, and I had done poetry writing and tried to take my crack at songwriting, but I don't think it was ever that good. It was more just like free range poetry. But I can remember writing things where people would interpret that and then in creative writing, and it was like, oh, yeah, I didn't think of it that way. That's really good. So that
Yeah.
makes sense. Is that what a music producer is kind of for? Is to bounce those off of and say, does this work, or is that more of a trusted advisor that you look to?
A little bit of both. I mean, a producer very often will help with arrangements. Like, let's throw a chorus right up top, as opposed to verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. Or sometimes they will help with arrangement like that. Dan, for me lately, has been helping as a little more of an advisor, just somebody to bounce things off of. Very often, just confirming what I already don't want to hear, but I'm pretty sure is right.
Yeah.
But like from an audio point of view, what a producer does is, I've got this raw song here. Here's 3 verses and a chorus. I can put them however I want. What guitar is this on? Is this an electric song? Is this a full band song? Is this an acoustic with a little bit of percussion? Is it a full on rock and roll? Decisions like that about the presentation of the song. The song is there, but the presentation is what the producer helps with, which is, it's huge. Like, it's huge when you're in there for somebody to say, you're singing something or play a solo or whatever, and they're like, that was great. Do it one more time. Okay, that's fine. Or say, man, that was it. You need to stop. That's perfect. And then just to not have to make little decisions like that about I've got the content, but the presentation, the packaging is what they help with.
That makes sense. I want to get back to the lost verses that you said, like once you take one out, do you ever find yourself going back and finding that writing that part of the story and creating something different with it? Or is it generally just like, I just cut it and it's gone?
No, yes to both. Sometimes it's just gone, and because sometimes what you're left with is a more powerful work when you take that thing out. I had one of the songs I was working on that we were going to record in a couple weeks had some sort of some story about some flooding that happened here in our area last year, and a friend of ours had his house washed off his foundation. And so I started writing something from that, and it sort of led into some social commentary. And I was it was a little bit of a juxtaposition of the two things. And the longer I worked with it, the more I realized, this is two different songs. And so, I took one out and finished it. And now the other one is sitting there sort of, a 3-legged chair that just needs a little something. And I don't know what it is. I just have this huge list of songs, and I'm a sort of a techie guy. So I've got them I have so many of them in Evernote that I have to use Trello to organize them. And like, I move stuff around. It's like, okay, well, these can go, let's put these on the 40% list. And then I'll just be like, okay, let's go through there. And then it's enough that I forget, and I go back. I'm like, oh, there is a whole verse here already about that. Let me just clean that up. Or sometimes a song will relate back to something else. And I wish there was a formula, but I think that's it. Evernote and Trello and a bunch of noodling.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds way more organized than what I would have thought maybe. You just kind of think of like, I'm a songwriter. I sit down and I write songs, but you're actually using tools to stay organized and say, okay, this relates to that, so let's do this and whatever. I mean, that's really cool. That's cool.
I have to. And I'm sure I think this is true with most creative writing. The idea for the song, the 2 lines, that's the freebie. That's what comes from wherever these things come from. And then it's my job to turn it into 40 lines of something that relate to that.
And as you're doing that, now you said earlier, a little bit ago, that the producer kind of tends to help figure out what it sounds like, the packaging. But do you also think of music? Do you think in terms of music, like I got this melody, I think it would go really good with this lyric or whatever? Or
yeah, I kind of do it all at once. Although recently I have noticed that I've been doing a little more of what the Beatles would do with the nonsense lyrics. I have several songs I'm working on now that I'm pretty sure I know what the chorus is, and I'm pretty sure it's this particular phrase. But then the verses, what I'll do is I'll just sit with the guitar, and I'll kind of create melodies that sound good, and then try to fill words back in to that. And I know I'd say the Beatles because I know they did that a lot. All those classic songs we know from them had nonsense syllables before they had English. And they like would work out all the melodies and the choruses and stuff, and then fill in the lyrics. And I mean, sometimes it works like that, sometimes it doesn't. But to me, they kind of usually tend to go together.
I've heard demos from Metallica do the same thing, so it's kind of funny that like
yeah.
And before I had heard that with Metallica, I'd never really heard of that because I'm, again, not a songwriter or a musician.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting to think, oh, okay, so you can just create that music and then fill in the words. So, yeah.
Well, that's the other piece of this whole storytelling thing is, you know, when I said you have the limitation of 4 minutes or whatever it is, 5 minutes, you know, depending on your genre, you also can lean on rhythm and melody, and that's a whole other little element to the story that doesn't that can support you and help people take breaks from the content. You know, I mean, how many good songs, for example, are just the dumbest 4 lines you've ever heard in your life, but the production and the beat and the whole package sells it. So I mean, that's the other thing that I think is different between storytelling and songwriting. And I don't know, maybe it's not, because I mean, maybe the presentation, you know, when you're telling stories anywhere is the same. You know, there's always a presentation level of it. Whether that's what you're wearing or how you're doing it, or, you know, how you're vocalizing a story, or I mean, I guess there's always some of that.
Yeah, a little bit, I'd say. But I mean, I think you're right that it is much different in music form. It's funny when you said just like the same silly 4 lines. I think of one of my favorite bands out there is punk, the Ramones, and just how ridiculous their lyrics were. But like, the packaging, the music, the way they did it was just a great little story. So,
yes, and if you go back and look at it, it was its own genre-defying statement at the time to do it that way. To say that was where that kind of music was heading at that time. I think when you go back and look at a lot of these things that we can't necessarily see 30, 40 years later, nothing came out of nowhere. There's a context for why the Ramones at that point in time made such a splash and made such sense. 5 years before or 5 years after, it wouldn't have worked.
Right. Which is a big part of why I really enjoyed, as silly as it sounds, the history of rock and roll as a college course.
Yeah.
Like in college, I took that, but it was amazing because you learned that kind of stuff and how it played. And then things like documentaries or whatever, then obviously tell that story too. But yeah, the history of it, just amazing. Do you find yourself going back to those kinds of things and saying, okay, I need a little inspiration. I want to kind of do something, going back to those times, those stories, those bands, and just finding that inspiration from those that came before you?
You know, I don't listen to nearly as much music as I used to. And I've thought for a while that that's a little bit of a shortcoming, but I think I'm just always trying to create so much of it. I mean, I listen to like weird electronic soundscapes and like, I don't know, yoga music, just things to keep me calm and centered. But what I do like going back to is biographies of a Bruce Springsteen or a Warren Zevon or these people that Eric Clapton. You go back and read these stories, Keith Richards, and it's like it's bizarre. I mean, that's what interests me is how do regular people become these icons that we think of, and it's a combination of them and their circumstances and their surroundings and the timing. I think that's always interesting because as someone who's still fairly under the radar and just trying to do the best I can to get out there, every one of those people I just mentioned have been in the same position and somehow have turned a corner and become whoever they are now to the mass audience.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty funny to think about the regular lives of those icons before. Aaron, you said you're just a little bit under the radar and you're trying to make it. So, and you mentioned earlier too that you're a contractor by day. What is it like, to live that life of, you've got this in you and you're doing great work. And again, I'm following on Spotify, man, great stuff. How can you balance that? Is that hard to be able to do that and say, this is who I am at my core, but I have to also support what my family and everything. How do you balance that to try to make it today? Does that even make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense because that's what I live every day and every hour. And yes, I have a family that I'm the primary provider for. I have a nearly 17-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old daughter, and wow. It's a lot. But here's the fact of the matter for me is music pays for itself and pays me a little bit and pays the band. It's getting better, but it will not pay a mortgage. It just won't.
Yeah.
If I want to have health insurance and a mortgage and pay my bills on time, I had to do something else. And slowly that morphed into this, construction business I run during the day. And so that's almost like the side track. Even though it takes probably more time, that's my side gig. This artistic part, I can't seem to stop doing. I mean, there's no, I'm an unhealthy person when I'm not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a part of who I am and how I connect. And, I don't know how you get here from there, but it just all happens slowly. I mean, like I got guitars everywhere. I like to pick them up everywhere I go. I try to spend just a few minutes a day working on a song or playing a little something. I came home for lunch today and I managed to play the guitar down here for 45 minutes. And it's just about balancing time. And it is not easy. And I wish there was about 30% less stuff going on somehow. And someday there will be, but today it's just slam packed full of everything, and that's just where we are. I don't know.
That's your season right now, right?
That's the season I've been in for quite a while.
So what are you doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to get that word out? I mean, is playing small bars and using social media kind of it for musicians today, or what are you doing, Aaron?
Well, I would say that's where we were 3 or 4 years ago. And now I have all the trappings. I have the manager and the agent and the record label, which really doesn't put you anywhere like automatically, but it sure does help with it just helps to get up to that next level. But for years and years, yes, playing little bar gigs and any kind of little festival and anything we could do, that's what got us to there. And then, having this team is getting me to this next level. And that helps. It helps a lot to, you just can't do this without representation at any kind of national level. It lends you an air of legitimacy, right or wrong. And they more than earn their 20%.
Right. How do you view the musical landscape today? And I kind of want to explore this thing of like social media. For a lot of storytellers, social media has been great, but also terrible, right? We have ADD. We had to get things out, get people's attention in 3 seconds now. But then also it gets us this big audience. And now in music, I feel like on one hand, while you have your representation, you have your record label, the internet has kind of democratized it so that, quote unquote, anybody can put out a YouTube song and get famous, right? That's the dream. I know it doesn't happen that way. But how do you see the musical landscape today as an artist, as a storyteller? Has the internet helped you? Has it made it more difficult? What's that look like for you, Aaron?
I don't know. I don't know if it's helped or not. It is what it is. It's changed so much. It's changed so much since 2002, 3. It's a long story, and I'm sure you've heard it before, but the whole the breaking down of albums into individual songs just decimated the music industry, right or wrong. That's what happened. Because prior to that, you were buying 12 songs to get 2 that you wanted. And it just broke everything down. You see the same pressures in video now. That's what's going on now with all this. That's the same thing. They're trying to avoid getting just shut down like happened to the music industry. And so now it's going to this streaming model. It's just completely different. Matter of fact, I told you I mentioned we're going in to record. We're not even going to release a full album. We're going to do singles because nobody can pay attention. We're going to go in and we're going to record a quarter of an album every couple months and put out a single every month. And that's what's happening now. So I'm like, all right, well, we'll try that. That's fine. I say I always say the industry and the artistry are completely different animals. They're completely different animals. And you can, very often, the only thing I have control over is the work. Matter of fact, that's what that song, Last Refuge, off of the last album is about, honestly, for me. It's like, okay, when I get frustrated because how come this person's doing so great? How come this girl that I just played with, she's doing great? How they just sold out the whole thing, and you get all that better than, worse than. And I'm like, well, wait, just damn minute. The only thing I can do is work on these songs. Like, that is the engine that makes the whole thing go, is the songs, the stories, the content, the work. And then hopefully the industry will sort of, and as it has, it's just taken forever. And like you said, those YouTube one hit wonder, or like the shortcut, it really doesn't happen very often. Yeah. I mean, we're talking percentages of a percentage of a point. The people I see that are doing it well, it takes a while. It takes a good long while. And you just kind of have to keep doing it. I mean, you have to believe in it, which I do most days. But you just have to keep going, and things line up or don't. I don't know. It may never work out, but I mean, it's working out pretty okay now. I mean, I enjoy doing it. I feel better. I know I touch people and connect with people, and that's really what the whole thing is about. Is I mean, that human interaction. So I don't know if the internet has helped or hurt that. It's almost like it's neutral. It's made some things better and some things a lot worse.
Mm-hmm. It evolves, right? I mean, that's, now on those days that you're having trouble believing in it, and I think every storyteller, every creative has those moments, right? Whether you're working on a book and you get stuck, you're working on a film and something happens, you're playing music every day and nobody's discovered you, you have those doubts. Is there anything that you do to help get yourself out of that? I mean, there is obviously, but like, what do you do?
I just keep going. And that's like I said in that, I come back to the things I do have control over, and that's the work. I have control over the work. I have control over how much of myself I put into the work. I have, I'm not necessarily in control of all my time. I'm certainly not in control of whatever the internet thinks is great for them for this 20-minute period. I'm not in control of where we get booked or who gets noticed. But I come back to, what is it? I have to remember that I do it not because of that industry stuff. I do it because, I don't know, I'm just supposed to be doing it. And it's so unlimited opportunities to quit, unlimited opportunities for frustration. It's not for the, I think any kind of creative endeavor like that is probably not for, you just got to get kind of a thick skin, and you don't, because I mean, we're all very sensitive, but at core, that's why we're doing this kind of work. But you just kind of have to be realistic. I mean, I don't know. I just sit down with a guitar and get quiet and do my thing, and it's fine. That's what it's about.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to explore one of your songs. Let's see if this, I don't know if this goes back real far in your database or not, or in your catalog or not. 3 months of 12.
Oh yeah.
I heard that song and it just made me feel at home. Take me through that song a little bit. I want to explore that story. Where's that song come from? What's it about for you?
That song, that's when I was living in Boone, North Carolina. I was in college up there, and I lived in this huge old dilapidated farmhouse, built in the 1880s or so. And I was kind of steeped in this old time and mountain tradition at the time. And that we paid like $100 a month for that house, so we split it to it. And there's a fireplace in every room. It was on a bunch of acreage there. The guys still farmed tobacco there, on the New River. And I mean, there was a graveyard out back for people that have lived there forever. And there's a real sense of history up there. And I'm often thinking about how different things are a couple generations past. And I was really thinking about that then. The other interesting thing about that house is it faced sort of southeast, and when it was built, there was pasture all down in front of it. But now, and it was cleared, but now the trees had grown up, 70-foot pine trees across there. So what would happen in about mid-November is the sun would drop behind those trees, and it just wouldn't, it didn't come back till April. That house got no sun through the entire winter. And so that sort of inspired the 3 months of 12 we don't see the sun, because it was cold. The water would just freeze, and I don't know, you just lived with it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of that came from an old farmhouse, and oh yeah, and I always thought about, I had a 4-wheel drive vehicle and a grocery store a couple miles down the road that I know was not there 50 years ago, not even 30 years ago. And so you think about it, when you're living in conditions like that, I have an easy way out of this, but like those people in the graveyard back there, they didn't have a way out.
Mhm.
They just hunkered down and dealt with it. I mean, they were way smarter about canning and having food available and all, but
Sure.
that's kind of where that came from.
That's cool. Now, when you sing that today, does it take you right back to that moment? Or is it kind of more like you're just
Oh,
a pilot stream?
a little bit, a little bit. That song, it has like like a fear in it. That's kind of um, that sort of foreboding, that sort of feeling that cold wind blows down the mountain. It's coming. Oh crap! Have I done everything I can do here to get ready for this? Because pretty soon I'm not going to have an opportunity to catch up. Have I saved up food? Have I saved up firewood? Um, yeah, I can go back there.
Hmm.
We haven't played that in a while. Maybe we need to put that back on the set list.
That's a good one. Yeah, because I picture like, when I write something, when I write a story, I tend to write and move on. I don't necessarily go back and read it again and again, or try and tell it again and again. But I've
Yeah.
always thought that like performers, I mean, you sing that song again and again and again, and the bigger your catalog gets, probably the less often you sing it because you have other stuff. But it has to be repetitive, because when somebody likes a song, the fans do, you got to go back and repeat it. And so I wonder if
Yeah.
they become like old friends, where where you can feel yourself there, or if it just becomes this autopilot of like, yep, we're gonna sing, write what you know, and I just know that I'm gonna sing these lyrics here, and we're done. And it's all like muscle memory. So yeah,
Well, that's interesting that you say muscle memory, because that's the only way I can remember the words. Like I can't. This is the primary problem when somebody comes back and says, "Hey, can you play X from 6 albums ago?" I'm like, I know I can get 2/3 of the way through it, and then I'm not sure what's going to happen. So like if we haven't played it in a while, I have to have that muscle memory to remember it. But as far as performance is concerned, all I have to do is be in the song. That's my job, is to trust the song to do the work. If I just show up and sing it and perform it right, it should do the work. Now, are there songs from? I mean, there are songs that we've never played. Basically since we recorded them, they just never worked out. There's some that we play every show somehow, and some get forgotten, and I go back and I look, and we're like, oh, you know what, we should pick that back up, or maybe a new member or something add something. And we're kind of doing that right now, trying to go back and dig up some older songs to rejuvenate. But I mean, you're always looking forward. I'm always looking for. I mean, I like to sing what people want to hear, but I also like to try new things. And I mean, that's always the in any kind of show, the set, you want to play some familiar stuff, you want to play some new stuff, might want to play a cover or two just to let people relax for a second.
Yeah.
And I don't know, trusting that story that's supposedly in the song is the trick for me to feel comfortable and not be afraid that I've got to do. I mean, I have to show up and like put myself into it, but in theory, it should do the work because I did the homework before, hopefully.
Right.
I mean, there are some I don't like, and I don't ever want to sing the dang thing again. And I probably won't, or maybe I'll go back and fix it. I don't know. Older work, I'm sure you're familiar with. You're like, oh, I don't know. I really shouldn't have left that line in there. Why didn't I take a little longer time on that?
Yeah, I go back and look at old articles that I wrote or old anything, and I'm like, oh, that was awful.
Yeah,
I know.
I know.
It's funny you say covers too, because I'm obsessed with cover songs. Like when I hear one of my favorite bands sing a cover song from somebody else, I'm like, oh, that's so cool to hear their take on it, or to hear somebody new cover somebody that I like or whatever. I love that kind of stuff. Anyway,
yeah. Well, yeah, you can wind up with really interesting connections. Like you can be like, oh, why in the world would that that band be doing this? And I was like,
Right.
oh, well, maybe there's a weird tangent here
Yeah.
that you hadn't thought about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fun. Aaron, this has been so much fun, man. I really appreciate you taking the time today. I want to I'll get to my last question here in a minute, but I want to make sure everybody has a chance to connect with you, and I'll put links in the show notes so everybody can connect, find your Spotify artist,
Sure.
Everything else. Where's the best way for people to connect with you generally? Where do you send people?
AaronBurdett.com is sort of the landing page for all things. Links right on there to all the things in various stages of update or upkeep or not. But
right on.
You can certainly poke around on there.
All right. Yeah, we'll put that out there. I can get words out of my mouth. So Aaron, if somebody were to say to you tomorrow, and I know the artistry is part of you, and I don't know that you ever could put it down, but if somebody said to you, Aaron, you're done being a storyteller, what would that last story look like for you?
I did quickly look at some of your questions, and I saw that on there, and I thought, I have no idea. But as I think about it now, I think it would probably just have to be some sort of version of my own story, and my own relationship to things around me. And the reason I say that is, I believe that the most powerful stories and works and pieces of music and novels, I believe they are both a reflection of that person, that only that person could write in that way. Only that person could create that in just that way. And as I age and do this a little more, the more comfortable I am saying, oh, I need to put more of myself in here, because that's the only unique thing I've got, really. And I guess I would hope that that's what everybody else would do too, is tell a story that you know the best, and just be as honest as you can about it. I don't know how to tell. I don't know much how to tell a story that's not about me at some point, just tangentially, somewhere in there. And I can go way far afield, but there has to be one little element that I've felt really deeply. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah,
that's the best I could come up with.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, thanks for your time today, man. I appreciate you taking the afternoon here to speak to the Storytellers, man.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It's been fun.
And there you have it. Once again, thank you so much, Aaron Burdett, for joining me on the Storytellers Network. I could talk about music all day. I love it, man. That was incredible. You can connect with Aaron at the links in the show notes. Follow him on Spotify. Check out some of his music and find out if he's going to be near you as he tours a little bit here and there. So if you enjoyed the episode and learned something, got some inspiration from it, please consider sharing it all over social media, text it, just tell someone, however you want to do that. I appreciate it. You can also subscribe to our email newsletter. It comes out once a month with the latest couple of episodes and other information, and you can always forward that email on to other folks too. So storytellersnetwork.com is where all that is. If you hit the subscribe button on the website, it'll take you to a spot where you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the email newsletter. So check that out all at thestorytellersnetwork.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's to telling our stories and having stories to tell. Cheers.